So at this point, we'll transition the presentation over to our speaker. Nate, whenever you're ready.
Hey, thank you, Joseph. Really appreciate it. And thank you to the OHCA for having me. I was fortunate enough to be able to give this presentation or a similar one this past spring at the conference. And I guess they seemed to think it was worth sharing again. I know I certainly feel recognition is really an important thing to integrate into your culture. Can be a wonderful culture builder for your organizations and has far-reaching impacts. So, that's what we're here to talk about: recognition. Why it's important, why we should be doing more of it. But it's a little bit simplistic, I think. We all like to be recognized for our work, and we all, I think, enjoy probably giving others a pat on the back for doing a good job. My hope is that through this presentation, through some of the best practices that we talk about, we can all do it better. Recognition that creates impact. So ultimately, this is really about celebrating your wins. And I think, over the last couple of years, the scales have been tilted a little bit, where you sort of become accustomed to a certain number of wins. In the acute care space, hospitals sending people home. In the long-term care space, a great quality of life for your residents. And in shifting that balance, it sort of upset the way that people view their work and feel their impact. And so recognition, I think, is a great way for you and your organization, when prioritized, to be able to make people feel like they're making a difference, seeing that impact and feeling it on a day-to-day basis. I typically like to introduce the topic with a little bit of an anecdote. It's about Margaret Mead. She's a famous anthropologist, and did lecture tours of colleges and universities. And she was asked a question by an audience member. Basically, what do you see as the first signs of human civilization? And I think this person may have had a couple things in mind, whether a piece of art or a tool or agriculture or something of the sort. But Margaret sort of surprised everybody by talking about a picture of a human femur bone that had been healed in the middle. Now, an injury to your femur, which is your thigh bone, for people like me who are not on the clinical side of things, obviously would be debilitating. It would basically preclude you from doing the hunting and gathering, where you could be a contributing member to a group. But it showed to her that humanity cares for one another. It was a selfless act of compassion to allow somebody to heal and convalesce. And so, at our the very base level, healthcare and caring for one another is in our DNA. It's something that I think, in an age where stress and division and isolation, and we just had another election, it feels like they come around all the time, and people are in heated discussions about this, that, or the other thing. I think it's really important that we recognize compassion in our work and in our everyday lives, and elevate it to the level of importance that it is. Something that, as Margaret Mead felt, was fundamental and the first indication of a human civilization. So on that topic, or on that note rather, again, admire very much what you and your teams do in your work. And I'll just go quickly through a couple of objectives here. I want to talk about how recognition can lead to happy, fulfilled, and engaged people in your organizations and in your buildings, how engagement leads to better patient and resident experiences, satisfaction, and overall outcomes. And then the second half of the presentation will basically be dedicated to the best practices stuff, things that you can implement in programs and initiatives that put the focus on people, this people-centric idea, the human beings in your buildings, your staff members, but also your patients or your residents, and ultimately help tell the story of your impact, why you do what you do, your raison d'etre. And as Joseph mentioned, I'll try to stop for questions at some point here in the middle. Joseph, if you could just, if there are any in the chat, just please share them. But my view here is a little bit difficult to go back and forth, so appreciate that. I call this the Why Listen to Me slide, and I'll keep it brief. Sika Foundation is a nonprofit, so we are both passionate about achieving our mission, and we're not in it for the money. So I'm not here to sell you on anything other than the idea that you can make a big impact on your organization through recognition initiatives for your staff members. like a lot of philanthropic endeavors, Sika was born out of personal experience. The lovely lady on the slide here is Mary Lawler, who is the mother of Matthew and Rosemary Lawler, our founders. And they were inspired to create Sika because of the experience they had putting Mary into an integrated care facility at the end of her life. She went from assisted living, skilled nursing, Alzheimer's and dementia, and ultimately hospice care. And so they saw firsthand how much individuals, people who work in the buildings, and it's much more than just the nurses and the CNAs on the clinical side, but the housekeepers, the porters, how much each of these people had positive impacts on Mary and her quality of life. She not only had people serving her, she had people who cared about her, not just caring for her. And I certainly have had my own set of experiences with family and friends in the healthcare field. And, we understand, coming from that, the consumer side of things, how much the actions of individual people make a difference in the way that we perceive our level of care. So we basically do employee recognition programs in partnership with healthcare organizations around the country. And so in doing this for 10 years, we've learned a lot, and I'm hoping to share some secrets with you. And ultimately, after this presentation, you say, Nate, I love it, but I don't really know where to start. I'm always open to a conversation, finding ways to help you brainstorm and see if we can help. Now, you're here and you're listening to me because you want your organization to thrive. Obviously, maybe the topic itself resonated with you, but how does recognition contribute to a thriving organization or company? Recognition, I think, needs to be a really big part of the culture that you create. And so using what ASHRA, the American Society for Healthcare Human Resource Administration, has put together basically how human-centered initiatives can contribute to organizational excellence. And so I just wanted to sort of outline how recognition fits into that framework. First, it's about putting the focus on people, your patients and residents, of course, but your staff members, and importantly, allowing your staff and those you serve, your residents and their families, to educate you and have a voice in how to best provide care. So getting that feedback about something that somebody really appreciated can instruct how you do things going forward and improve your processes. Third, reinforcing culture, values, and purpose. Basically providing a pathway and a forum for you to talk about, that mission statement that you probably trot out when you're orienting new team members, and your set of values. Are you finding all the opportunities to resurface those, to talk about why they're important and to live them instead of just talking about them? Fourth, to build team and create a bridge to the general public. I think this is an interesting one, and we'll talk more about that. How do you connect what you do to people who aren't your patients or residents, aren't your clients, and don't work in your buildings? I think there's a lot of goodwill out there to create a bridge to the general public. And lastly, to celebrate excellence in a very relatable and human way. And we all like a party, some of us more than others, and certainly a pizza party qualifies as something like employee appreciation, but a pizza party does only maybe one or two of these things, and ultimately it ends in the digestive tract. So recognition can help you with all 5 of these, and we'll talk more about how you can use recognition to achieve all these different aims. I'd like to start by also asking some questions, just to get you thinking. And normally I'd have a handout or something like that to circulate and have you think about this ahead of time. But just sort of reflecting back on your career, who gave you your most meaningful recognition? Who was that person who said something positive to you, that kept you going, that inspired you, that made you want to continue in your career, continue to develop? Well, I think it's kind of interesting because there have been many surveys done about this, but you can see the answers are varied. About a quarter of people say it's their direct manager. Excuse me. Somebody who is there to mentor and guide them. About another quarter say the CEO or the top person, the head honcho in their company. Another 1 in 8 so say a manager's manager. Maybe that's, a DON, a CNO, some sort of functional head in your organization. 1 in 10 say customers. So I think this is understated for the healthcare world, because I know many of us get a whole lot of satisfaction getting positive reviews from the people that we've cared for. About 1 in 10 say their peers. It's sort of interesting. I think this really actually understates the importance of peer recognition. Doesn't quite fully measure the impact of it, but we'll talk more about that later as well. And then 17% have this ambiguous sort of nebulous other. I like to think of this as maybe it's, a family member or a friend who, said they were really proud of the work that you were doing, or saw something that you did and said, wow, you just have a real talent. And sometimes that's incredibly meaningful too. And you might say, well, how do you integrate something like your friends and family into recognition within your work, the professional environment? It's definitely possible. And many of our partners have found cool ways to do that as well. But this is all sort of to say that we all consume this recognition a little bit differently. The person who's providing it matters. And ultimately, we should be finding ways to involve all these different people and give them opportunities to recognize your team members. Next question, sort of around how you most like to be recognized. I'm sure you've heard of the 5 love languages. And could probably go through them. It's something that's been on the New York Times bestseller list probably since it was published back in the early 90s or something. It's sort of an interesting concept framework for how you can speak the right language to your partner and create a more fulfilling relationship. You may be doing something that you would appreciate, but your partner appreciates it in a different way or would prefer something slightly different. Now, there's a corollary to that applies to your professional lives, basically the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. So, we'll go through them here. Here they are: words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. So they've done surveys about this as well. How do you most like to be appreciated or recognized rather in the workplace? Almost half of people say words of affirmation. Seems like actually the easiest one, just saying great job, or what have you. About a quarter say quality time. So this might be, your manager or a leadership team member having a cup of coffee with you or sitting down to lunch with you and talking about your career tracks or, how they might be helpful to you in your work. Another quarter say acts of service, maybe lending a helping hand on the floor or with some complex task that, is overwhelming for you. Leadership servitude sort of falls directly in there and obviously very much appreciated. And then you got, basically 1 in 20 saying receiving gifts. And so I maintain that 19 out of 20 people are liars. We all love gifts. Who doesn't want a thoughtful gift or even a bonus, cash gift. But I think, it may be that some people are embarrassed to admit that they had show me the money or whatever it is. But I think what's sort of clear about this, at least, is that the most costly of these options, the idea of buying something, a tangible physical thing, is not the most popular out of all of them. And I'm sure we've got a couple of human resources people in here, so I'm just going to say, eliminate the physical touch one. We don't want to have people come complaining to you, but I do feel strongly that, a handshake, a hug, a pat on the back, all of those things can be appropriate if in the right context and circumstance. And I think, a lot of people who work in this industry caring for others, as helpers are very much appreciate the physical contact that when done appropriately can be meaningful. So, again, people like to be recognized differently, and assumptions about how you might, thinking that how you would prefer to be recognized is how one of your staff members would prefer. You may be way off base. You may not be speaking to them in their language of appreciation. So something worth considering and needs to be factored into whatever you do with regards to recognizing your team members. And then, after years of doing thousands of awards given away, One of the things that always seems to be, popular or a subject of discussion is, how do we get the biggest crowd of people when we present our award, and how do we keep it secret from the person who's going to be awarded? We want to jump out and have that surprise. Ultimately, for some people like me, Madison Square Garden wouldn't be a big enough venue for people to be, yeah, Nate, cheering, shouting your name. Other people would, rather crawl under a rock, frankly. I've literally seen people get rocks and hide under them, take cover. It happened just the other day. Everybody sort of assumes the surprise party with a bunch of people there is the best way to do it. But in all seriousness, a lot of people would just prefer to have a moment to prepare and think of something to say and, not feel embarrassed. And while it's not a perfect corollary, the Myers-Briggs test measures, introverts versus extroverts. And, people are generally split about 50-50. People who might like the big party, and other people who would prefer something much more small and intimate. And if you make sort of assumptions about men, women, or any other indicator, you've got basically a coin flip of being incorrect about it. You might assume one thing and you're shocked to find something else. So again, this is all sort of feeds into the idea that you need to know your team members. You need to sort of understand them on a different level. And it's easy to say, obviously, that you should spend more time with them and know more about them. But you've got dozens, if not hundreds of employees, and it's hard to get to know them on that level. But this is something that you can find out, when you bring them on, or through surveys. How do you like to be celebrated? How do you like to be shown appreciation? And would you prefer to have a surprise party or a small intimate gathering with the people closest to you? So just things to think about, again, as you try to, figure how you might do employee recognition better. This is a little bit of sort of educational, academic, and so I'll try to go through it really quickly, but I think it really is incredibly important here. So, Maslow was basically a social psychologist, and he came up with this idea of a hierarchy of needs. On the low level, basically the foundation are sort of referred to as deficiency needs. If you don't have them, you're going to have a bad time. Food, shelter, clothing, all of those things. On the top half of the pyramid are what he referred to as sort of fulfillment needs, purpose, self-actualization, things that stretch your mind and, touch your soul. And, the stuff at the bottom, obviously incredibly important, but as humans, we have this, opportunity for transcendence, and a paycheck is not enough to get you that. And this, again, has been sort of applied in many different ways, but has been applied to work as well. You got the base level, your deficiency needs can be solved by money through your paycheck. So by having a job and having an income, you can get those things that allow you to lead a comfortable enough life. But it's only through things like recognition and seeing your impact and understanding your purpose that you get towards the top of the pyramid, where I think we all want to be, which is this feeling that what we do is what we were put here on earth to do. It's our calling. It's not just a job. It's more than even a career, something you've decided to invest your life into. It's something that you really feel inspired by. And I think this is something that's really does reflect well on why, sort of a great example of why recognition can be once you get past the paycheck. And I know everybody in this virtual room is finding out how to, make sure that they have competitive pay for their employees. And we'd all love the easy button, or that lever that you pull and 50% raises come, flying out of the ceiling. It's not coming. So you got to look on how to, work in the mean, and something like recognition is a huge bang for your buck in terms of impact. By the way, the employee pyramid is something that was created for the Barrel Institute, which is sort of a patient experience, probably the preeminent patient experience organization in the country. But it was by a boutique hotel CEO, a luxury hotel CEO. And it's very much, you probably feel it on a consistent basis. It's a service industry. from a clinical standpoint, the medical side of things, your competency is assumed. They assume that people have their certifications and they know how to draw blood and they know how to dispense medication. Feeling listened to and valued is really important. And, again, it's something that if you've ever waited tables, how you get treated is incredibly important, how you feel when you walk away at the end of the day. We're 2 years into a grueling period for you and your team members, and you may say, well, okay, great. This would be, a wonderful thing to, if you're starting from zero, to be patting people on the back and talking about how great everything is. What about the people who are already feeling burnt out, disengaged, symptoms like exhaustion, frustration, feeling ineffective, withdrawn even, sound familiar? You probably have some people in your building who you say that describes them to a T, and who could blame them? These are depleting emotions. And these are things that we all encounter at some point during our day. And the question is, is that the dominant thing that you get to feel? Recognition is an incredibly effective way of combating those symptoms. Appreciation, gratitude, the feeling of dignity and being seen. They're what we call renewing emotions. They put fuel in the tank, which, may be a metaphor that nobody understands in a couple of years. So I'll say it's like, charging your battery, since we're going electric here. But ultimately, again, this is a way to help people who are feeling ineffective and dehumanized feel like they're making an impact, feel like they're seen and noticed, and their efforts are appreciated. So again, those people who are feeling down, a great way of bringing them back a little bit is to talk about the things that they've done in their day, in their week, in their month, in their year that have made an impact on people, team members and patients or residents or family members. Now, this is kind of an odd one, but I hear a lot that the general public, people talk glowingly about those who work in this industry, and they say, well, they just have a gift for caregiving, and of course they mean well, but I think it sort of discounts the amount of work and effort and training that it takes to cultivate this compassion that people in this industry have. And I feel very strongly that compassion and empathy can be taught, and it has to be cultivated over time. Just because you have this quote unquote gift to care for the elderly or whatever it is that you do day in and day out, it doesn't mean you get fulfillment in doing it. And you've probably seen over the last few years some of your best people leave, or choose to retire early, and you're sitting there saying, well, gosh, they're just so incredible at what they do. Why would they want to get out of this, of doing it every day? Well, they're not getting that same satisfaction they were previously. And there's sort of physiological reasons why this can be taught and how you might be able to cultivate it. So, something like mirror neurons, where you sit on a bench and you see a kid fall off the swing, you sort of wince along with them. So you feel hurt when others feel hurt, and you feel joy when others feel joy. And so it's, again, these are ways to sort of bring those emotions out of people, because these neurons are mapping onto your feelings and the feelings of others. And I thought this was very interesting. There's a portion of your brain called the nucleus accumbens, and it's basically a reward center. And as it turns out, it's, they've done studies, monitoring brain activity. This part of the brain gets activated by compassion. And when they look at the effects of various different things on that portion of the brain, the same portion of the brain lights up through, using opioids and drinking alcohol, and making love, things that are, obviously intended to create pleasure. And compassion does that. It seems like that, which of these things is not like the other. No, I think compassion is just hardwired into us as something that, allows us to function as a society. And again, you can cultivate it through sharing the stories of it, showing it repeatedly. And so how do you train, people to have compassion, have empathy, and treat people with respect? One of my colleagues, Dr. Helen Rice, has a 3-hour empathy training that she does in hospitals. And just from that 3-hour empathy training, they saw a 100% increase in patient satisfaction scores, double increase based on 3 hours of training. And I find that recognition is a great way of sort of training or learning people on doing the types of things that make a difference for your patients and residents. So you collect stories of empathy and compassion in your buildings. You show examples of effective compassion occurring in your walls, and you give people that feeling of impact, and they are going to want it again. They want to go back to the well and get more of it. So sharing it with your people obviously encourages, just by highlighting it, people to reinforce and replicate those behaviors. So that's the end of what I call sort of the academic portion, the recognition session. I want to talk just briefly about engagement, because obviously the recognition part is fun, saying thank you, talking about great things that happen. Ultimately what you're trying to get is engaged people in your building, people who are engaged in their work. This is something that impacts your organization through having either engaged or disengaged people. And it's a little bit of a squishy term, this employee engagement, but I think ultimately it boils down to 3 components that I think are going to be useful here as a framework. And I'm doing a lot of sharpening the axe right now, and so I hope you stick with me, because we'll get to the part about how you can do it better. But it boils down to 3 things. How you view your work as a calling, sort of like Maslow talked about, what is the job that you're doing? How you view yourself as being part of a team, whether you view yourself as part of a team or people pulling in the same direction. And do you feel your employer's values are in line with your own? So basically, if we're mapping it back to Maslow, it's esteem in what you do, belonging as part of a team, and purpose or impact in working for an organization that doesn't just talk the talk but walks the walk. And I think Maslow would agree, and this is the challenge you have in front of you: connecting people to what they do, building team, and showing people that the organization is behind them and with them. So what drives employee engagement? So I run a foundation here that's all about caregiver recognition, and even I was astounded by this survey results on the figure on the left. Employee recognition bests cultural values, your interactions with your direct manager, and work-life balance as drivers of employee engagement. I'm sitting there thinking, your work culture, your relationship with your boss. I mean, you hear it all the time. People don't quit jobs, they quit managers, they quit bosses. And work-life balance, what could be more important? As a small aside, I had a friend who said, I just hate that term work-life balance, because it sort of insinuates you have 8 hours of the day where you go to work, 8 hours of the day where you come home and spend time with loved ones, and 8 hours of the day where you fall asleep and get your rest. And it's like, is it really that way that we can just divide up life so simply? He preferred the term work-life harmony, which I like a lot more, because again, a shift can be, working a long shift or a double or something like that can be more tolerable if you enjoy what you do or you feel like you're making a difference. And this is where I started putting it together. Employee recognition actually has impacts on all 3 of those things. It can help you reinforce your culture. It give you an opportunity to talk about your mission and values and the behaviors that exemplify it. It's a pathway for managers to provide the carrot for their employees. It's something that good managers know that they should be doing, is encouraging and congratulating people for succeeding and doing things well. And then, to the other point, your work and life can be more aligned if you enjoy what you do at work, and you'll get more, you keep those things that you care about in your personal life, in your work life, and by using employee recognition, you get an opportunity to make people feel their impact, make people feel like they're doing a good job. So, it makes a lot of sense when you think of it in that construct, that it's a driver of all 3 of the other things. But I thought, frankly, very shocked when I saw it the first time. And then from sort of like a total rewards perspective, the greatest impact on employee engagement is, again, employee recognition, outpacing tuition reimbursement, diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, perks, wellness initiatives. And this is not to say that none of those things is worth investing in, but again, we're all working in the margins here, if you've got limited budgets, I commend you for doing some of these other things, but you really should be investing in ways to recognize and show people their impact within your organization. So, again, we're hopefully building the case here for why recognition needs to be a priority and needs to be something that's invested in if it truly outpaces all of these other important things. This is kind of just a funny slide, but I like to bring it up because you may be familiar with the symbiotic relationships in nature, and this is an example of one, and one that you might not expect. The bird is a red-billed oxpecker, and the gentleman with the horns is a water buffalo. And they sort of have this relationship, Timon and Pumbaa from the Lion King type thing. But again, not exactly what you would expect. The buffalo, the oxpecker keeps the buffalo safe. The small guy is the one looking out for the safety of the big guy. He eats parasites off of his hide, and he warns of danger when there are predators approaching. He makes a sound, and the buffalo knows to run off. Meanwhile, the buffalo obviously provides a endless supply of things for the bird to eat, and obviously free rides around the swamp or around the woods here. So there's also a really great and wonderful symbiotic relationship between your employees and those that you care for. As it turns out, engaged employees beget engaged residents and vice versa. In the hospital setting, Press-Ganey found that every 1 point increase in employee engagement led to a 2 point increase in patient satisfaction, so double up. In the post-acute space, Holler & Consulting did a study and found that employee engagement was the highest correlation of all the metrics they tracked to resident engagement across the board. So even the appearance of engagement is incredibly important. Another study had nurses basically come into patient rooms and spend a finite amount of time, 3 minutes or something like that, do it by timer, but half of the group was asked to stand and half of the group was asked to sit when they talked with the patients. The nurses who sat were perceived to have been there twice as long, and all of their patients had positive impact on the satisfaction levels, compliance with convalescence and medication, the relationships they felt like they had with the staff there, and a decrease in litigation, length of stay, and overall costs, not to mention improved outcomes, just from nurses sitting for the 3 minutes that they were in a room rather than seeming like they might be ready to rush off to somewhere else. So again, being engaged, even appearing engaged, and having the mental fortitude to just come in to do what you're meant to do is incredibly important. And this is what recognition is all about. Ultimately, it's not a checkbox exercise. It's not a nice to have. It's a critical component of the caregiving culture, particularly in this industry. So you think that having these passionate people who work in your buildings, the caring individuals who enter the field and do what you do, that healthcare would ultimately have a real advantage. And unfortunately, the sad realities, currently and historically over the last decade or so, the outlook has been relatively bleak. Very low engagement in the sector, high levels of burnout, feelings of unappreciation, and people leaving jobs as a result. 2/3 of people basically saying they feel unappreciated, and almost 50% of those saying that they've left a job because they didn't feel appreciated. This one's just scary as heck. 1/3 of nurses saying that they're very likely they'll leave their job, and 1/3 of those saying that they might leave the field entirely. And obviously incredible financial consequences for all those things for provider organizations. Now, in the ideal world, we start to prioritize things like recognition, culture, teamwork, because they are incredible drivers of engagement. We invest in our people, in recognizing our people. Companies that allocate even modest amounts towards recognition see overwhelmingly positive impacts. Improved quality of care and safety, things that obviously that's what you're there to do as a result of prioritizing these things, and ultimately saving money for your organizations. You don't want to be one of the 75% or so of AHCA people who responded to a recent survey saying they were worried about their organization lasting years into the future. So again, these are things that need prioritizing and have incredible organizational benefits. This is usually everybody's favorite one, so I'll let you take a look at it for a little bit. It's a dog drinking coffee. But it's in all, jokes aside and funny images aside, there's a saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I believe it wholeheartedly. Strategy is very much top down. Culture permeates all the things you do. It's basically the sum of all people, and it's organization wide. So, how do you create your culture in the recruitment process? What do you tout about your organization? What do you take pride in? During the application process, do you confirm receipt of resumes, provide timelines, set expectations? Onboarding and orientation are obviously different things. Onboarding is where you ask important questions, and no, it's not just their social security number, their date of birth, and their bank account and routing numbers. It's their goals, the things that how they like and dislike to be managed. All those earlier questions that we talked about, knowing the answers to those things can help you understand how they want to be shown that they aren't, part of that 2/3 of people who said they don't feel appreciated in doing what they do. And then in orientation, clearly, repetition of your mission and values throughout and reinforcing it on a day-to-day basis through things like recognition, which can help you build that culture. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people say, oh yeah, we've got a program, that says thank you to the employees, or, employee of the month or something like that. But almost every organization that I've talked to says, yeah, we had a program, and now that I think of it, we haven't actually done it in 3 or 4 months, and we should get back on doing that. Inevitably, after a couple of years, something happens, and these well-meaning initiatives just aren't supported anymore. It might be leadership turnover. Maybe there's unrepeatable processes, things that make it difficult to just keep it going. A lack of buy-in from the team members. You're not mentioning it, like I said, during orientation, talking about the importance of teamwork and recognizing one another, and you get stuck on this seesaw of relaunching, reinvigorating a broken program that ultimately, if you're not seeing consistent success, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and you're 1 step forward is in the same place here. So you got to have consistency in doing this, and that just means, again, dogged determination to keep mentioning the importance of it throughout the employee life cycle. And ultimately, you got to nurture this stuff as sort of an everyday endeavor, but what you water ultimately grows, and recognition is a great way to connect people to their work, provide them positive feedback from managers and leadership teams, and build team through peer recognition and even sort of public celebrations of successes. So you can water it with things like an award program or a recognition initiative that's comprehensive and thought through, and that can help create job satisfaction that benefit the employer relationship, improve teamwork, and you get the things that are basically the fruits of your labor: employee retention, engagement, quality of care, and patient experience. Okay, so I'm a little bit more than halfway through, so don't worry. I want to just take a second. This is all the dense stuff, and we'll get to some of the more fun stuff here. But Joseph, just wanted to see if there were any questions in the chat, and then I'll continue going here.
I don't currently see any questions.
Okay, great. That undoubtedly means I'm doing a wonderful job, and my authority here is unquestioned. But hopefully there will be some, and feel free as well, share some things that you've done that you feel like have been impactful for your employees, in showing them that, in reminding them of their impact and recognizing them in important ways. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of organizations sort of make the same mistake of conflating a couple of different concepts that are related, but I think incredibly distinct. And those are employee appreciation, employee recognition, and caregiver recognition. They're three very different things. Employee appreciation is things like your holiday parties and buying pizza for the team, giving away a gift card or something like that to everybody. It shows that you appreciate them, but it does so in sort of a very one-dimensional way. It's swag. It's stuff we all get. It doesn't promote uniqueness or individual impact. It just says, hey, I've saved you, $5 or $10 for lunch today. You're welcome. Then there's employee recognition, which I think, again, important. Things like years of service, tenure-based type recognition. It might be employment-based. People who are moving up the ladder of getting their certifications, getting new certifications, going from CNA to LPN and LPN to RN. Things very much worthy of celebrating, but they're really more about the job and the job as an employee of your organization. Caregiver recognition is really focused very specifically on the actions that improve the lives of the people that you serve and care for. So, a great way of getting this stuff is sourcing it from your patients, residents, clients, because then you get to, hear from the horse's mouth what types of things they see as being impactful for them. And ultimately, it's kind of a storytelling exercise. It's a way to talk more about the purpose of the organization and the individuals who work in it. So you get the impact of having made an impression and a difference on somebody. It gives meaning to the people doing it and gives a purpose to all of the efforts of you and your team members. So again, this is why just throwing that pizza party is a nice gesture, but it doesn't have the same impact. And, like I said, ends in the digestive tract. So now we'll move on to sort of the best practices and what I refer to as the science of recognition. Another acronym, you probably needed it like a hole in the head, but this hopefully will prove that providing TLC for your FTEs is easy as ABC. So if you can remember the word impact, you can remember the 6 tenets that we've identified for really impactful recognition. This is basically the components of a world-class recognition program, and it will help you achieve those organizational objectives we talked about towards the beginning. So first, the I is inclusive, for anyone, from anyone. It means that recognition can occur for anybody across different job roles, regardless of how visible they are. In our programs, one of the most popular people in the building is the receptionists. They're the ones who are there with the smile, with can I help you? Every time you walk in the building, they always seem to get a lot of people saying, thank you for what you do. Less so, the IT guy, the maintenance person who's, wrestling with the boiler that you've, been putting off by, upgrading in some back room. They don't get seen as much, but they're just as deserving of the recognition. And so, having a program that's just for the CNAs or exclusionary in some way is not an effective way to do it. You got to make sure that everybody can feel their the difference that they make in people's lives, and that it gets talked about. It shows everybody that you're pulling in the same direction. Also, it helps if you can be appealing to all demographics. So, clearly, multi-generational workplaces, there are some differences in how people view things or what they value. So if you can find ways to make it appealing across demographics, just to the young people and the older people, it's going to be more effective. And I think a lot of leadership teams and managers, rightfully so, look at recognition as being their cross to bear, something that they're supposed to be doing. But what percentage of your staff is in a managerial or leadership team role? It's not more than 20% or so. So you're leaving 80% of people outside of the equation, and patients and families. A lot of organizations have close to the 1-to-1 staffing to bed ratio. You can double the opportunity for recognition by including patients or residents and their families in the opportunity to recognize. And as you mentioned, that hearing from the person that you're serving that you're doing a great job just hits differently. So just remember that you should give a 360-degree view of this to people. Everybody can recognize and be recognized through a program. Next, the M, mission aligned. So I've sort of mentioned this a number of times already, and while I don't want to harp on it, I do. This is a great opportunity to use that mission statement and those values that you probably spent days sort of trying to figure out and coming up with something clever and making them map to your name. You spent the time on it, and you really do feel that they define you and what your purpose is. But when are you talking about them? This is a great way to bring those things up. It shows that it's integrated into the organization. It's supported by your leadership teams. It's a great opportunity for leadership servitude. Just again, talking about the impact somebody makes and how that relates to the overall purpose of the organization. This is basically your professional mantra. You have your personal mantra. Maybe you repeat it to yourself every morning about what you're all about. This is your professional one. This is what your organization's all about. And the more you repeat it, the more people believe it. It gets ingrained in people's heads, and they start thinking that way of, how does this relate to the compassionate element of what we're about, or the team element, or the service to our communities, whatever it happens to be. If you can repeat it as your mantra, people will start to think about it more and believe it more. Now, I don't know that this video is going to play, but hopefully it does. This is a cute little video. Maybe we won't watch the whole thing, but just I think a little bit of fun here. The P is for public. Now, I want to take a moment and just say that there are a lot of leaders out there, and they're not all cheerleaders. And this video does not seem to be working, but I encourage you to look it up. Jessica's daily self-affirmations. Some people like Jessica in this video, who stands on her sink and yells to herself about all the things that she loves in the morning. Ultimately, we're not all like that with this boundless, unlimited energy to be cheerleaders out on the floors and even during routine public celebrations. Other people have sort of this gift of gab. I'd like to say that the people who can sort of peel the onion just down to where the tears are. They write these things that inspire you. You see this a lot with chaplains and people who do social work, that they really have a way to sort of connect an action to this higher purpose. But you don't have to have either of those things necessarily. And when you're celebrating people, it doesn't mean that you have a big surprise party with the balloons and the singing and the fireworks. A brass band on Bourbon Street. That stuff gets expensive. It doesn't have to be any of that. Although music is a wonderful, wonderful thing to include in these, because again, it's something that connects people and can lend to the festivities. But ultimately, the most important thing is it's just visible to your stakeholders, your employees, your residents, the people who visit your community. If they see you celebrating the wins, the things that have gone well, they'll start to see those wins more often, and they'll understand where your priorities are. So again, it's also another opportunity for leadership servitude, to be out there front and center, making bad jokes and patting people on the back and just, serving up a slice of cake maybe. So being there allows them to connect the dots with you. So if you take nothing else away from this presentation, I really hope it's this one. Recognition in the ways that you do it through the programs cannot be cookie cutter. They must be authentic. So, I don't love beating up on the, heroes work here banner. But, after a couple of weeks, people probably walk past it and don't even see it anymore. Might start asking the questions, well, if I'm such a hero, then why don't you actually tell it to my face now and again? It's really important that any recognition that you do comes off as authentic. And it's another reason why employee appreciation, everybody gets a bag of swag. It's cookie cutter. Everybody got it. It doesn't make anybody feel special. Did you know that 75% of people save handwritten cards? I know I'm one of them. Got a drawer full of these things. And I do every once in a while sort of go back and read through them, and, brings a smile to your face. So I think, the idea that you can do something that shows even a little bit of effort, and it shows that you have noticed something specific about a specific person who did what, when, for whom. That's kind of the the model here. I saw this person do this and it made a difference because of this. It's formulaic, but that will be meaningful. It's got to be personalized to the individual. One of our partners sort of took it another level and basically sent handwritten notes, not to the employee that they wanted to recognize, but sent them to their homes, to their spouses. Thank you for lending Jenny to us for 5 days a week. She's incredible and she makes a difference in people's lives every day. That's something that, again, is sort of unique and really could get people, feeling like, oh my gosh, well, that was a really kind thing for my boss or my CEO or administrator to do. Sort of an authentic act, and maybe sort of a solution to that shy team member who would rather crawl under a rock than have people pop out with balloons and say surprise. Now, my brother got married recently, and I told this anecdote at his wedding, and so I hope he doesn't mind that now I'm telling it to a room full of strangers. But when he was graduating high school, my parents threw him a little party, and they invited his friends and their parents, but also my parents' friends, people who had known him since he was a little kid. And of course, they bought presents for him. The game of life, the places you'll go, a starter toolbox, these cute things that obviously thought through, meaningful, and hopefully were appreciated by him in receiving them. And the weeks go by, the months go by, it gets closer to the end of the summer. My parents are saying, Evan, have you sent these thank you notes? You got to tell these people that you appreciated them sending something. And he's like, no, I'll get to it. And of course, he doesn't get to it. One day he finally, storms upstairs, figures he has a bright idea, goes onto his computer and starts typing. Dear blank, thank you for coming to my party. It was great to see you. I appreciated your gift of blank, and I'll definitely use it for blank. And he prints out, 50, 75 of these things and mails them to all my parents' friends. As you can imagine, we've gotten, so much mileage out of this, joke, laughing about how inauthentic, how cookie cutter this approach was to saying thank you for something. Don't be like Evan, handwrite the note. It doesn't have to be more than a few sentences, but the ink on the paper will be send a real message to people that you took the time to do it. And even if it's not a whole lot of time, you took the time and it was individualized for them. The C is for consistent. Now, Gallup recommends that you recognize team members every 7 days. And that obviously doesn't have to be the handwritten note. It can be just verbal rather than formal recognition. And that may sort of seem like a lot, but I kind of like the concept because it fits into these weekly schedules that we have. You may have your Monday morning leadership team meeting. One of the things that we always recommend and we try to do internally in our foundation is to start the week off with gratitude, get people together, talk about what went well the week past, what we're going to work on during this week. And it's I think a pretty good way of, again, starting to feel like, okay, here's the good stuff. Here's the things that we accomplished, the successes, and just briefly celebrate them. It occurred to me that I never really thought of it that way. I always known about it, but a lot of different religions, they start every meal with being, showing gratitude, saying what they're thankful for. And again, it's just about establishing a routine of having that feeling of appreciation for what you have or what you do or what other people do around you. Either way, it should be done frequently, and it should be done across the employee life cycle. Every 7 days, maybe not even enough for early stage employees. The first 90 to 100 days of people's work is a really critical time, very high turnover. If you can get past those first 100 days or so, you've got a much better chance of keeping people. I think finding ways to, frequently recognize those who are early on, who are just cutting their teeth, who are trying to decide whether they want to stay in this industry or be in this industry, is really critical. So I think do everybody else a favor and try to find ways to get them off on the right start. If they stay with you, great. Hopefully they have a lifetime of service to your organization, but if they don't stay with you for the life, their entire career, somebody else hopefully gets to benefit from having them. One of our partners basically had us add a column in our reports for the award that said the employee's start date. So it gave them the opportunity to say, okay, well, this person's actually has only been here 60 days. Wow, wouldn't it be really nice to do something special for them? And so they make the extra effort to recognize all the people who are in the early stage of their life cycle, and recognize them for something, no matter how small, early on there. So see if you can find that time on a Sunday to write a handful of cards, or make a list of the things that you're grateful for that your team members have done. That routine can be really helpful. And the T, last letter, is timely. If you do it at the point of impact, it ensures that not only there's like an immediate gratification for people, but it is at the very least remembered. An annual review is not the time to give praise for a year's worth of good actions. Hey, back in February, you had this great thing, and you're kind of saying, huh, I don't remember doing that. It's just clearly not sufficient. So, you may have annual reviews. Hopefully you got them more than just annually, but that's not the point to, pull up the dump truck and say, okay, here's like the 10 things that you did really well this year. And at that point, it may be too little too late. You may not even make it to the annual review. Somebody's already out the door. So something like spot recognition is ideal, but there are some other ways this can be done efficiently, quickly. And most of all, again, it gives clarity on the actor behavior and the opportunity to directly tie it to your values and purpose. And a quick bonus here. So see if you can find ways to thank the storytellers. If you're going to ask them to tell the story of what exceptional care looks like in your buildings, what's going on behind closed doors when managers and leadership team members aren't there to see it, you can get more of what you want by showing them that you appreciate their efforts. There's a very lovely quote by an author, Muriel Rikers. It says, the universe is made of stories, not of atoms. And I really believe that. It's how we construct our world. And so the more of these stories that you can collect, and the more parts of your community you can engage in the act of storytelling, the more of the stories you get. So, I, like every kid, everybody in my generation at least, I saw The Karate Kid, and I knew about the bonsai tree, but I never really knew about the art of bonsai. What is the purpose of trimming this thing? It's the art of shaping and maintaining a small tree to make it look like a big, mature tree. And that's kind of what this sort of storytelling exercise is like. This is what recognition programs can provide you, the opportunity to shape these small stories about kind, compassionate acts of teamwork that reflect the bigger purpose of the organization. And you cobble those things together, you stick them on your website, you stick them on your marketing materials, and you talk about them in conversations with prospective residents and patients. That's how you sort of put together this big mature tree of a powerful organization that achieves its mission and bears fruit. So again, think about it as storytelling, and try to thank people for helping you tell the story in a productive way. Second, this is again about celebrating. It's about patting people on the back. So have fun with it. Give personality to your program by being creative. I've seen people give away rubber chickens. It's ridiculous, and what does it even mean? But it's something funny. It makes people laugh. It makes people smile. I've had people give away fake pieces of dog poop, literally, and basically saying, way to make the best of a SHITTY situation. Just something funny that gets people, smiling. As we all know, that smiling can help uplift not only your own feelings, attitudes, but others. And we really need humor in this line of work, frankly. It's exactly something that brings us together as human beings, and a day without laughter is a day wasted. So if you can find ways to be funny and humorous with this stuff, all the better. And then lastly, recognition can gain credibility and weight through bringing in outside stakeholders. So there may be a bank down the street that wants to support, elder care, senior living, hospice, whatever your organization does, there's probably someone down the street who'd love to support it. A local hardware store, fire department. If you can bring those people in, then it feels bigger than the organization alone, not just about as an HR exercise. It has meaning outside of these walls, which I think, again, makes people feel really good. So we're dealing with, and probably always will be instructed by the pandemic. I think I'm ready to remove this slide because none of us want to hear about this anymore. The pandemic's been awful, but it is a reason why technology solutions for things like this are important and can be useful. Obviously, there's benefits of technology, automation, measurability, the sterile element, but there's the other side of training, maintenance, and ultimately cost. People are always worried about the cost. I like to try to flip it around. You talk about what you invest in, not what it costs, but you make that decision. So, when you are thinking about investing in technology, especially recognition technology here, how do you want to do it? Basically low to no technology, a paper-based system that you stuff it in a box somewhere. You go around and you collect it once a month, or maybe you do something, a little bit more easy to manage and centralized, a Google form, or hosting something on your website, that a form that people can fill out to recognize one another. And then at least you have sort of a database of nominations. You can even have an email address, kudos@yourorganization.com, and at least it's a central repository for collecting these things. The larger investment, or at least can be, doesn't have to be, is to basically have a dedicated platform. Maybe it's bolted on to your HRIS system, but basically allows anybody to recognize anybody else. The person gets notified of being recognized. Then you can slice and dice data and see how you're doing in terms of participation, impact, surveying, all of these things. I think ideally you want to have. And tech, it's a 4-letter word. It's your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on the day. But as long as it's paper thin and simple, people are used to using platforms. They're used to using computers and their cell phones. So I think technology can be important, and you don't have to go, all the way to the all singing, all dancing system, but probably better not to be, walking around your building collecting pieces of paper from a box to keep your program running. And we talked about the I and impact, it being inclusive. You can make this a big tent exercise through peer recognition, and again, getting all of these stakeholders in your employee community involved. Ultimately, because 80% of your employees are not in a managerial role, there's just a whole lot of bang for your buck in having them take part in the exercise. And from an organizational standpoint, better financial outcomes, quality of care, patient resident experiences, all with peer-to-peer recognition being components of it. And when you sort of hand it off to other people, one of the most satisfying things of all, you get to take off a hat. I don't know about you, but I've felt over the 10 years almost I've been doing this at Sika, I've worn a lot of different hats, and just like this captain's one, I did not look very good in any of them, and so I love the idea of being able to hand off something to somebody who looks better in the hat, who complements your skill set. And you'll find that people in your organization are wonderful storytellers and feel very passionately about the work that they do. And so when they talk about something that others have done, it comes across in a way that you find inspirational and everybody can benefit from. Without being a downer here, everybody in this virtual room is getting older by the minute, and the workforce in your buildings is by necessity getting younger. And so it does, it's worth thinking about, creating a culture that can last into the future. How people like millennials want their feedback, want to be recognized. We're seeing people retire who have been around a long time. You got people coming into the field. Ultimately, you want them to stick in the field and not, run for the hills and decide to go 10 bars somewhere. The younger generation, they're tech savvy. They're used to using their phones and computers to do all variety and manner of things. And in addition to that, they're social. and this is not just social media. This is, social generally. Without just harping on it here, if you can make recognition social, where people recognize one another through a platform, or at least through some framework, you'll see increases in productivity, retention, engagement, satisfaction, finances, all things that social recognition can do. Again, if you can build a program that incorporates it through the use of technology, ideally. And then another 4-letter word here, Zoom. I feel like we're on one right now. Basically, we're all a little bit tired of them. And I feel, kind of a 4-letter word these days, but I think it does enable some creativity and inclusiveness. If you have a parent company, corporate headquarters somewhere, not locally, it's a way to have them join from across the state or the region of the country and celebrate with you and talk about, this is what our organization is all about. And, it feels nice to see, somebody who's obviously got a high up position joining you for those celebrations. It has impact. Another really fun idea was that we had one of our partners, they reached out to the person's daughter and granddaughter to attend as sort of a mystery guest. So the screen was up blank with a little question mark on it. He said, oh, by the way, we had somebody join, they've been listening along and they wanted to give you a message. And you turn it on and you see, your child and your grandchild sitting there. I mean, it was just waterworks. These, that's how you may be able to get that, 17% other that people say is their most meaningful recognition. I think we all would love for the people we love the most to be able to see us have our shining moment, and we all benefit from it. So another way that technology can be an asset to you. Obviously, if you're going to do something, you got to find ways to measure it, and then ultimately be able to defend it as an expense or an investment to your leadership teams, or to those who are looking over your shoulder at the budgets. You got to find ways to measure this stuff. What are you looking to achieve through the program? There's certainly things like in business metrics like turnover that you can look at, a real key one, and obviously one that we're all trying to solve. And we're seeing our partners solve it with recognition in part. You have regulatory metrics, things through surveys that might be good to look at, but ultimately the best way is to ask your team members. Employee surveys, you don't have to recreate the wheel. There are a lot of validated resources, companies who sort of are expert at this, but they have a list of questions that you can include in your employee surveys, and it doesn't have to be long. We utilize a 10-question survey, pride of authorship, but no pride of authorship. I'm happy to share it with you. I think they're really good questions that are simple, straightforward, and about 10 of them that help you get at the idea of, are my employees engaged? Do they like the program? Do they like our program? And how do they feel about the level of care at our organization? So you got to measure to determine whether you're succeeding at it, but it doesn't have to be a painstaking exercise. And I'm sure you're all very used to doing surveys. Two other cutting edge or novel ways that I think surveys can be helpful. You can do obviously patient and resident surveys, but they tend to be a hassle and are kind of expensive often. Press Ganey does this stuff for hospitals and they charge a king's ransom. I mean, 6, even 7 figures to them for this stuff. So we sort of took this idea and turned it on its head. Why don't we ask the employees how they view the care of their organization? And you get some really interesting results. They're actually tougher on their own organizations than your clients are. So we started doing what we call the Caregiver Net Promoter Score. You're probably familiar with the Net Promoter Score, even if you don't know the term. Would you recommend this product or service to a friend or family member? And you rate it on a 0 to 10 scale. And you can sort of see how it's calculated here on this slide. But we ask it of the caregiving staff of your employees. Would you want your mom or dad or friend or family member being cared for here? And again, they will be tough on it, and as long as you keep it anonymous, they'll give you a piece of their mind. They see the sausage being made, and ultimately, they're going to be a good indicator, a good proxy for what patient satisfaction, patient experience looks like. The other concept is around the idea-driven organizations. If you get the opportunity to do a survey, you also get the opportunity to ask people to help you solve issues that you're running into. Ultimately, who better to understand the pain points of the work than the person doing it? And there's this famous quote from Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or something about hiring the laziest person to do the hardest job because they'll figure out the shortcut. And I'm not insinuating in any way that the employees are lazy, but they're the ones incentivized to find solutions to a problem. And if you ask them their opinion, you may get a great idea in there. 9 out of 10 might be harebrained, but that one great idea is something that you can then implement, and it becomes a time saver for everybody. It also makes them feel like they're heard and, again, appreciated, that you are asking their expert opinion on something related to their work. So a great way to help keep people engaged, and something that shows that you recognize their experience, talent, authority at something, and ask them to help you make your organization better. Getting close to the end here, I do want to mention that for all of the AHCA state affiliates, if you're looking to do the gold, bronze, gold, silver quality awards, a formal recognition program that's comprehensive and sort of well established is something that can help you get to the silver and gold level. You can see the two criteria here, where formal recognition would be a checkbox there. Again, this is nice, something nice and shiny you get to put on your website that tells people we care for others here and we do a great job of it. And anything that you can do to set yourself above the crowd is always a good thing. So recognition can be a part of achieving those sort of additional certifications. And then I just want to leave you with this saying that you're not alone out there, and this is not in the X-Files sense. You're not getting beamed up. All organizations are challenged by the rising wages, the tight work employment environment out there, and obviously the difficult challenge that is in healthcare right now. But there are partners out in your communities, and there are certainly technology providers in the recognition space that want to be able to help you with this stuff. So if you're walking away from this saying, God, Nate, that sounded like a lot, drinking from a fire hose here, good. I want you to walk away thinking this is not just a checkbox exercise. You need to put some thought into it. But again, if it's too much, feels like too much to do your own, I'm always happy for a conversation. We come up with great ideas ourselves, but more often than not, great ideas come from the people that we work with. And we've got a network of people who have come up with funny, creative things over the years. And I'm happy to share them with you. And, as a nonprofit, we're obviously also very open to working with you on helping you with your own award program. So, do not fret. There are people out there to help. And I'll now open it up to questions. I really appreciate your time here. I know I ran a little bit over, but I love talking about this stuff, and I know how important it is and how much of a game changer it can be for organizations. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Joseph.
Okay, we got a question on inside the chat box. Social media director here, his name is Scott Smith. Any tips on making public content that recognizes employees, ways to make that content personal?
Yeah, so I think, again, this is a great opportunity to get something outside the walls of your building. Obviously some of these things you want to be able to templatize a little bit, just for ease of doing it, making it a repeatable process. But I find that if you can identify a short quote about, if you're recognizing something for a specific action, which I think is the ideal, a short quote that exemplifies precisely what this person did that made an impact. You get those, you see it on social media a lot, these little quotes, bracketed with little quotes here, and it catches the eye. You read it, and then you can put more information, the full story basically in the lower text. If you want people to engage with it, that's the thing, is sort of nice to have something small and pithy, but also wonderful if you're able to get photos of the person either being presented with an award or in the process of doing what they do best. Video, photos. again, pushing somebody down the hallway in a wheelchair. It allows people to sort of put themselves in the moment. And I think, again, some people don't like being highlighted, social media or otherwise, and that's understandable. But the story is worth telling, and I think that does need to get out. And even if somebody doesn't feel comfortable being identified, the story is what's important, because it elevates us all, and it gets people feeling like they understand better what people do in this industry, instead of just reading the newspaper about all the hard things, the sad things that happen. So hopefully that is helpful.
Okay, we did have a comment from Ashley in the chat box. We have an employee appreciation program where we have the employees give us ideas each month on what they want to see on our employee appreciation calendar for the following month. That was just a comment from Ashley.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great, Ashley. And again, listening to your employees, allowing them to inform you, and obviously the double-edged sword, which is you got to show that you're actively listening, but you don't have to do everything that they say. But obviously, really wonderful when they can come up with those creative ideas, and it takes a little bit of the work off your back, and then they can see it in action the following month. So I think that's wonderful. Thank you, Ashley.
And I think that was the last question. So I'll make a final call for questions. I will remind everybody that you'll receive an email after today's webinar to complete the evaluation for today's program. You have to complete that evaluation to earn credit.
And thank you again, everybody. Really always honored by the opportunity to talk to people who are doing the really important work out in their communities like today. So I really appreciate your time. And if you want to practice, authentic recognition and talk about how great somebody was, you can start with me here with the survey. But in all seriousness, I really hope you found something to take away from today that was helpful. And if you want to talk, have a conversation, you see my contact information there. I'm always happy to do it. This is something we're passionate about, and we love helping.
All right, Nate, thanks for your presentation today, and thank you for our audience for your attendance. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.